Welcome to Midnight Casebook, where every shadow hides a secret and every mystery begs to be solved. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Father Brown and the Widow at the Closed Window, a fan-made story paying homage to the brilliance of G.K. Chesterton's legendary detective. We'd love to have you along for this enigmatic journey. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, share your theories, and if you spot any inconsistencies, don't hesitate to call them out. Your keen eyes and sharp minds help us craft even more captivating mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. The Widow's Grief. The storm crashed outside like the herald of doom, the rain drumming a frantic tempo against the ancient slate of St. Edward's Church. The muffled thud of footsteps on the damp cobblestone echoed through the shadows of the village as Father Brown hastened toward the newly lit candle in the dimly glowing rectory window, a beacon flickering in the tempest. Just as he crossed the threshold, a desperate, breathless knock shattered the stillness. A stricken figure, Madeline, Lady Margaret Trent's maid, burst in, soaked to the skin and shaking in those rapid moments that felt like eternity. "Father, you must come. Lady Margaret is dead." The words fell heavy between them, oppressive as the storm. In a moment, the world outside, the raging darkness, the howling wind, seemed overshadowed by the grim scene unfolding within the confines of the Trent estate. With only a flicker of doubt, Father Brown made his way. The estate loomed ahead, like a ship in the tempest, its large windows casting honeyed light, an outpost of warmth and wealth against the night. But tonight, that warmth was suffocated by death. He was ushered into the opulent study, the grand oak desk, littered with an assortment of hastily stacked papers, and the ghost of Lady Trent's graceful handwriting, a testament to the hour that held her last. There she was, slumped over in her chair, her pale face turned sideways, atop a crumpled letter, ink blotting the fine linen of her blouse like some tragic signature of fate. A pair of trembling hands garlanded her throat. Father Brown's breath caught in his throat, for nothing suggested foul play. Yet the tension in the atmosphere spoke otherwise. The door had been bolted from within, and the fire crackled softly, blinds partially drawn, wrapping the room in a shroud that felt almost conspiratorial. Madeline stood, pale and trembling, her eyes wide with shock, as another figure emerged from the shadows. A tall man with ink-black hair and dark-rimmed glasses, Dr. Reginald Wilkins, the village physician. He was solemn, his voice low but steady, as he confirmed, "She's gone, Father." A tragic end. It seems she took her own life. A gasp escaped Madeline, and Father Brown saw her clench the edge of the desk, nails biting into the fine wood. But she'd never, not Lady Margaret. The heartfelt denial resonated, drenched in genuine disbelief. Yet Father Brown's gaze turned slowly to the figure of the widow, the way her fingers clutched the contents of that letter, an unbroken whisper of anxiety lingering in the dim light. "Madeline," he said gently, "when did you last see her?" "I stood outside the door while she penned a letter. She wanted to be alone. I should have stayed with her." The shame in her voice fell like raindrops against the window pane. But Father Brown's gaze was anchored upon the letter that graced Lady Margaret's lifeless fingers. "Father, I must ask," interrupted Dr. Wilkins, shaking his head. "You know her well. Do you think there's any doubt she would—" "You know?" A flicker of doubt ignited in Father Brown's mind as he knelt by the desk, the smell of burnt wood and fragrant sandalwood filling the air. The candlelight threw shadows across the room, forming cryptic shapes that danced around them. We mustn't be too hasty. I sense something unnatural. Lady Margaret was known for her cheer and composure. Surely there must be more to this. Madeline looked up, her eyes glistening with something more than grief, fear. But the letter, she told me she had no future, that she was trapped. Surely it explains. No sooner had she spoken than Father Brown's keen gaze landed on the remnants of a broken vase on a nearby shelf, its shards glittering like deceptive jewels. You were close to her, weren't you, Madeline? He turned to her, his eyes piercing, yet understanding. What do you know of her affairs? The maid trembled, as if wrestling with a haunting secret, but a deep sigh escaped her lips. It's just, she was unhappy, that much I know. I heard whispers in the village, wrongings done by her husband, but I thought it was the wine talking. The mention of the husband stirred something inside Father Brown. Lady Trent's estranged spouse, Lord Sebastian, was known for his absence, but heard often in the wheels of gossip, a man with secrets, perhaps something darker than disgruntlement. Does he perhaps keep a close distance from her now? At that moment, a sharp intake of breath arose from behind Father Brown. Turning, he saw a figure in the doorway, a tall man in a dark overcoat, drenched from the storm, with an intense expression shadowing his features. It was Lord Sebastian. I came as soon as I heard. What has happened? His voice tremored with feigned surprise. The eeriness in his gaze suggested a deeper entanglement. Father Brown sensed an unsettling tension unfurl between the newly arrived husband and the grieving maid. A tragedy, he replied delicately. We believe Lady Margaret's death to be a result of her own hand. How fortuitously you could return from your business so swiftly upon hearing such news. A rare occurrence, indeed. The stranger's eyes pinned Father Brown with a defensive glare. I was culpably bound by affairs, Father. A man must earn his keep. Madeline recoiled, horror painted across her features. You were not at her side when she needed you most. But before the confrontation could deepen, the sharp clang of the church bell tolled across the night, sending a shiver like ice creeping through the room. Father Brown's mind raced, and the shadows around him thickened with suspicion. Betrayals, alliances, and secrets lay buried within the very marrow of their relationships. As the final note of the bell rang out, Lord Sebastian's eyes flickered downward to the desk where Lady Margaret lay. I'll have her property cleared and the service arranged, he announced with a hint of desperation. But then his gaze fell on the crumpled letter, and for an instant a flicker of recognition passed across his face. I suggest, Father Brown interrupted, stepping closer, that we read what was left unsaid. But as he moved towards the letter, he noticed a glimmer of something small beneath Lady Margaret's outstretched fingers. An object, partially hidden by her lifeless hand, shone like a beacon amidst the shadows. Just as he reached for it, a distant gunshot rang outside, echoing starkly through the room. A gasp erupted from Madeline, and the flickering candles cast spinning shadows that danced madly across the walls, the air thickening with danger. "Stay here," ordered Lord Sebastian sharply, stepping back as if to guard himself by distance. But Father Brown had already turned, déjà vu whispering of something lost, and the world outside transformed from a downpour to an encroaching twilight of uncertainty. With his heart racing in cadence with the tempest, Father Brown's gaze locked onto the figure retreating into the night, his pulse pounding like thunder, as he leaned closer to the lifeless hand of Lady Margaret and the buried secret it held, the darkness of the storm and tragedy swirling around them. Would all truths remain buried, or was this the moment when the shadows would finally lift? Chapter 2. The Sermon Interrupted. The church bell tolled from the steeple, its mournful chimes swallowed by the howling wind that splashed mud against the stained glass of St. Edward's, reverberating inside like a harbinger of doom. Just as Father Brown stepped onto the altar, breath drawn in preparation for a poignant sermon about mortality, a loud crash echoed through the nave, shattering the sacred stillness. A figure lurched forward, panting, a scrap of parchment clutched in his hand, flinging it to the polished floorboards at Father Brown's feet with a consternation that rippled through the assembled congregation. It was Edgar Pritchard, the village clerk, usually the epitome of decorum, now uncharacteristically disheveled, his hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wild with urgency. "Father, you must read it," he gasped, the words clawing their way out of his throat as if wrenched from an unseen torment. Murmurs rustled through the congregation, a tide of intrigue and apprehension lapping against the pulpit's sanctity, as Father Brown, stooping down to retrieve the note, felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing upon him. The note, hastily scrawled in frantic script, betrayed a desperation that wrapped itself around Father Brown's heart. "Secrets hide in shadows. Observe the one who watches," it declared cryptically, fading into a shaky assertion of alarming finality. The smell of damp wood, mixed with incense, wafted around him, wrapping the moment in an oppressive void. Somewhere in the church a child whined, the sound like a sudden flicker of light amid a perpetual dusk. "Father, is it about Lady Margaret?" a voice called out, a curious parishioner leaning forward, eyes glinting with morbid curiosity. The whispered sounds engulfed Father Brown, almost drowning in the familiar shadow of suspicion. He held the note aloft, the congregation's attention now laser-focused, forming their own narratives around the tragedy. "Indeed," Father Brown said, his voice steady, though his mind was churning, whirling back to the strangling atmosphere of the Trent estate just hours prior. "We must tread lightly. Rumors can be more deadly than truth itself." As he firmly placed the parchment in his coat pocket, the storm outside escalated, the thunder rumbling like a predator circling its prey. But tension was not confined to the tumult of nature. It snaked its way through the flock, each whisper painting an invisible web of suspicion that ensnared guilty and innocent alike. "Father, I fear that matters of the heart breed storms far worse than this," Mrs. Hatfield, the village gossip, interjected, her voice pitched in urgent tones. "Lady Margaret's death is shrouded in darkness, and now, even here, at the heart of our community, it seems we are not free of the malevolence that overwhelmed her." "I fear truth is a treacherous path," Father Brown responded quietly. He felt the prickling of eyes as he surveyed the pews, the pall of grief convoluting with keen interest. Among them, Lord Sebastian's shadow cast a deeper gloom, his face an inscrutable mask that hinted at knowing without revealing too much. "Let us not forget why we gather," he urged, attempting to weave back reason into the trembling air. "In the passion of our worship, we confront not only our faith, but the grim realities that bind us all, found in our hopes, our fears, and perhaps our secrets. Today, let us honor Lady Margaret's memory without casting unfounded judgments." Yet, as he spoke, his thoughts spiraled on the innuendos laced into the very woods surrounding them. There were whispers about Lady Margaret's husband, strange tales of estrangement, and unnerving grumblings of betrayal. The note's unsparing implications, echoing in his mind, left a bitter taste like unwholesome fruit. The last echo of his voice lingered, but before a candle could be lit for intentions both divine and human, a shuddering cry exploded from the nearby door, suddenly flung open. Only thick grey skies and rain-soaked turmoil welcomed the gaze of those inside, yet it was nothing out of the ordinary. But then, a man standing just beyond the threshold caught Father Brown's attention. Tall, with penetrating blue eyes, framed by dark brows, glimmering waves of unease traced his sharp features. The village's own Detective Inspector Carruthers had arrived, his presence bringing with it a cloak of authority and disorder. "Father," he barked, panic etched into his voice like a freshly carved stone. A body, a second one, at the estate. The collective gasp fell like a stone into the heavy silence, and even the wind held its breath. Father Brown felt the earth shift beneath his feet, sensations intertwining between dread and anticipation as he regarded the inspector. Another death? Completely unrecognizable, but Carruthers hesitated, drawing in a tight breath, a shadow passing over his face. But it must be connected. An effort to silence the truth. We've got to act fast. If there's more to uncover, we risk letting... Suddenly, the loud crack of thunder crashed external to the church again, echoing through the rafters, punctuating his words with a palpable finality that seemed to reverberate with the creeping sense that something insidious was at play. Time seemed to fracture, with hearts thudding against chests in frantic rhythm, as the ghost of Lady Margaret loomed and an unknown fate awaited. Father Brown's brow furrowed deeply with his heavily deliberated silence. What danger reverberated out from the walls? What carefully hidden truth? He turned slowly, exposing nothing to his parishioners but the depth of resolve brewing within him. "Gentlemen, the storm outside is nothing compared to the tempest of secrets we are about to unearth. Time is indeed of the essence," he stated, eyes cutting through uncertainty like a galvanizing flame. And just as he began to lead the way out toward the tumultuous night, a piercing scream jolted the congregation, slicing through the mournful atmosphere like glass shattering. A cry from the shadows, echoing the truth that rang far sharper than the church bells above, heralding chaos yet to come. Chapter 3: The Guest Who Never Took Tea. The door swung open with a feral creak that mingled ominously with the crashing thunder, the stark silhouette of a figure catching Father Brown's eye as he stepped into the wrath of the stormy night. Rain lashed against the cobblestones, transforming them into a treacherous mire as anguished shouts clashed with the chaotic symphony of wind. In an instant, a piercing scream echoed from within the shadows of the estate, summoning a foreboding chill that snaked down the spine of the priest. "Madeline!" The name erupted from Father Brown's lips, though he had no clear sense of the peril lurking within the household. The heavy air of the night was so thick with tension that it pressed against Father Brown's chest as he made his way toward the flickering light spilling from the windows of the manor. With each step, the world seemed to close in around him. The sense of damp earth and wet wood mingled with the metallic tang of fear, winding together until they formed an intoxicating haze that left him breathless. Inside, the clamor swelled like a tide, the frantic voices of family and friends ricocheting off the darkened walls, a cacophony punctuated by the solemnity of a life extinguished. He encountered Lord Sebastian, whose pallid face was twisted in horror and confusion, the crumpled letter still clutched desperately in his grasp. Behind him, Madeline stood frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks like rain tracing the contours of a darkened window. The room smelled of incense, overpowering and dense, filling the air with a sense of sanctity unearned, clashing grotesquely with the shambles of life and death there laid bare. "Father Brown, it was a terrible mistake. I didn't mean to," Lord Sebastian blurted, his voice quaking, revealing cracks in the facade of his composed demeanor. A reflection caught Father Brown's eye. An ornate mirror hung crookedly on the wall, its silvery surface betraying a glimpse of pale faces lined with disbelief and guilt. "There is no mistake in death," Father Brown replied, his tone steady, the authority of his presence clenching their mounting anxiety. He knelt to inspect the scene, his mind racing with fragments of conversations and unsettling glances from the living. The body of Lady Margaret had been removed, but remnants of her presence, a broken teacup on the floor, its porcelain shards glinting like stars fallen from the night sky, spoke of an intimacy now shattered by her tragic departure. A scuffle at the far end of the room caught his attention. It was Edgar Pritchard, who had burst into the room, his eyes alight with the thrill of discovery tinged with dread. "The note, Father," Edgar announced breathlessly, gathering everyone's focus. It contained warnings, and now, I believe the very words haunt us. "Warnings, you say?" Father Brown raised an eyebrow, intrigued as he wasted no movement in observing the trembling clerk. "What was written down that bears the weight of such gravity?" "Secrets hide in shadows. Observe the one who watches," Edgar stammered, the panic in his voice escalating into a near roar against the clamor of the storm outside. "I thought it was a warning, a mere superstition, until now. Now it feels like an accusation." Father Brown regarded him keenly, observing the subtle tremor at the corners of his lips and the perspiration beading on his brow. "Edgar, you notice something?" Father Brown said quietly, leaning closer. At the estate, among the guests, who indeed was watching? His inquiry hung heavy in the air until reticent Lord Sebastian finally spoke. All were gathered for the tea, but one guest, she never took tea that afternoon. "Who?" Madeline implored, as if the answer would deliver Lady Margaret's spirit back from the veil. With the flicker of candlelight dancing across his chiseled features, Lord Sebastian said slowly, "Lady Aveline." She arrived uninvited, and yet vanished without a trace, Edgar continued, the pieces intersecting under the candlelight, illuminating a blend of fear tethered to whatever secrets Aveline might hide. Only her laughter lingered, like a ghost haunting the hallways. "Strange," Father Brown murmured, as a shudder rolled through him, not from the storm, but from a sudden insight. If one ghost had fallen, what might be the nature of the other? He remembered the way the room held its breath just before the storm, each hesitant word a drop leading to the flood that swept away Lady Margaret's life. The laughter that lingered. "Tell me, what did she sound like?" "Like silver bells," Madeline whispered, her voice edged with longing and fear. "And did you hear it? Before Margaret fell?" Father Brown pressed, as the urgency of their situation ignited something deeper within him. His thoughts turned toward the darkness beyond the estate, the woods that stood sentinel to undiscovered secrets. "She was clever, always avoiding eyes," Madeline finally admitted, her gaze darting to the corner, where shadows coalesced like conspirators. There were whispers, things she knew, yet as the words settled, a crash cast a pall of dread over the gathering, an unmistakable thud, the sound of a body falling outside. The storm howled as if in answer, extinguishing a flickering candle within. "Stay here," Father Brown ordered sharply, his heart racing anew as he rushed to the door, unyielding in his resolve. Outside, the rain hammered against the manor, but something else drew him further, into the night, a figure retreating into the tree line draped in shadows, the unmistakable silhouette of a woman. He called out into the tempest, "Lady Aveline." The figure hesitated, then turned abruptly, revealing a face narrowed in pain and fear, but just as quickly she vanished into the darkness, swallowed whole. Father Brown felt the chill grip him. Was this the veiled watcher, the thread pulling tightly through this tapestry of horror? He turned back, heart pounding, as another crash of thunder illuminated the way. The moment had definitely come when shadows would lift. Yet what lay beneath could just as easily shatter him like the broken teacup. There was no turning back. He would untangle this storm tonight, but shadows had their own secrets, and he could already see them, lurking just beyond the edge, hungry as ravenous eyes in the dark. Chapter 4. The Will in the Vicar's Study. Crimson flames danced in the hearth, casting frantic shadows that flickered against the stone walls of the vicar's study, but the glow paled in comparison to the tension that gripped the room. "It's gone!" Madeline's voice trembled, an echo of despair, mingling with the muffled thunder that rolled ominously beyond the stained-glass windows, casting fractured light patterns across aged church records strewn haphazardly on the desk. Father Brown felt a shiver snake down his spine. Something vital had vanished, a will that could snuff out the flickering hope of Lady Trent's heirs, who had gathered in fevered anticipation, now turned to dread. The door swung open, and Inspector Carruthers stood in the entrance, soaked through, his eyes wild as if he had fled the tempest itself. "Father, I heard shouting. What madness lurks in the air?" "Madeline believes Lady Trent's will has vanished, Inspector," replied Father Brown, the authority in his voice, marking a freighted solemnity over the chaos that had erupted. As if competing with the storm outside, voices began to clash, raising accusations amongst the uneasy airs, a symphony of greed and betrayal woven with the ties of blood and kinship. "In the light of death, this is no trivial matter," Carruthers pressed, stepping further inside and closing the door against the waning tempest. The air held an electric charge, thick with the scent of burning logs and mildew, years of secrets sheltered under the cultured veneer of the vicarage. "I dare say, in the shadows of grief, some would seek to benefit most tragically." "Do you mean to suggest—" Lord Sebastian's voice quavered, taking a step back, the pallor of his face illuminated by the fireplace like a ghost exhumed from the past. "That someone here?" "Certainly. This storm bears witness to more than just frayed tempers," Father Brown interjected, his gaze sweeping across the room, measuring each expression. "Fear has a way of rendering the innocent guilty and innocence a mere guise for guilt." Madeline wrung her hands, her knuckles stony white as she turned to Father Brown, her voice low with disbelief. "But, Father, surely no one here would act on such darkness. Hope, my dear, is a fragile candle in the winds of ambition," he mused quietly, eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scattered records. "Yet it is the tendrils of greed I must trace." He rose, determined, his tall figure a bastion of calm amidst the tempest of emotion. The fireplace crackled, the shadows shifting, as he sifted through the chaotic paperwork strewn across the desk. A funeral notice for Lady Margaret. Letters signed with trembling hands, polite charity requests. All documents filled with remnants of desperation and entangled truths. Then, nestled away in the recesses of a ledger, something gleamed. A plain, unmarked envelope, partially hidden, a stark contrast to the disarray. "What's this?" Father Brown murmured, drawing it out. The embossed seal melted away in the candlelight, an acute promise cradled within. It bore the unmistakable weight of potential wealth. "What have you found?" Madeline asked, her voice a mere breath against the charged atmosphere, peering over his shoulder as though the envelope might reveal not just a letter, but Lady Trent's very soul. An envelope unadorned by signature or label. It could augment our search for clarity, but we must proceed with care, Father Brown cautioned, his heart racing as he tore the seal with deliberate precision, eager to unveil its secrets. The delicate paper unfolded, revealing handwritten notes, clumsy and hurried, written in a hand that faltered as much as it persisted. "This will be known only as the will of special interest, transferred to the first eligible." A sudden crash outside, echoing through the study, interrupted his reading, shaking the papers beneath their fingers and eliciting frightened gasps from the room's occupants. "Father, what if—" Edgar began, but his voice fell away as fear clutched the hearts of the assembled. "Nothing is ever as it seems," Father Brown warned, the pieces falling into place in his mind. "The estate is rife with tension, riddled with torn threads that could unravel lives. Whoever is behind this knows what lies at stake." "Father, the will," Carruthers interrupted, urgency lining his voice. "It may be the key to uncovering deeper motives, yet we cannot disregard the threat lurking within these hallowed walls." With swift determination, Father Brown turned the envelope upside down. A delicate key slipped forth, glimmering dully in the candlelight. A key that suggested hidden doors rather than closed ones. "So the plot thickens," he noted quietly. "But whose door does this key unlock?" A heavy silence coated the room, as all eyes couldn't resist the gravity of the implications. "We must investigate," Father Brown asserted, keeper of the light standing defiantly against the dark, as thunder clapped once more, shaking the very foundation of their abode. But before he could take a step toward the door, the sound of frenzied knocking shattered the air, the door rattling as though beset by a spectre. "Who is disturbing our reprieve?" Lord Sebastian asked, his voice edged with panic as Carruthers mobilized to answer. With a definitive gesture, Father Brown instructed the inspector to let in whoever awaited outside, a certainty smoldering in him that whatever entered would leave a mark on their already sordid evening. The door creaked, and a pallid figure entered, breathless and disheveled, hair tangled with rain and dread. It was Lady Aveline, her eyes wide, glistening with the sheen of unshed tears. "They found something in the woods. It's awful." Her voice trembled as thunder cracked overhead. "Speak," Father Brown demanded, sensing the hidden undertow of an emergent truth as the candlelight flickered like the breath of the storm gathering around them. "What did they find?" An object," she stammered, fingers clenching at her blouse, the fabric soaked and darkened, contrasting the pale pallor of her face. "But I fear it could change everything." "What did they discover?" Carruthers pressed. A wide-eyed Aveline inhaled deeply, horror flickering across her features as if she had glimpsed into some void that should remain untouched. "The missing body, another one." The entire room seemed to exhale a collective gasp, a sound swallowed by the raging storm outside, as Father Brown squared his shoulders. Then we must leave at once. For whatever has been unearthed, I strongly suspect it runs deeper than the grave. Yet just as he turned toward the door, an agonized scream rent through the clamorous air, cutting through them like sharpened glass, a shrill cry echoing into the frantic winds of a night that held far more secrets than they dared to uncover. He jerked, heart hammering, and for the briefest moment, the world held still. Then it resumed its urgent course. Where had the scream originated from? And what unseen entity lurked in the shadows, ready to unveil its machinations amidst their frantic pursuit of truth? There was no time to lose. The embers of peril glowed coals hot, and such flames would burn those who dared to remain too close. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Garden. Blood curdled the air. A scream cut through the gloom of dusk like a knife through the heart of the estate's fragile tranquility. Father Brown stood immobilized for a heartbeat before instinct propelled him into the murky labyrinth that was Lady Trent's garden. Abandoning the flickering candles and swirling shadows of the study, he pushed through a damp curtain of ivy, the scent of wet earth and withering blooms overwhelming his senses like an uninvited spectre. Thunder rumbled overhead, resonating through the twisted branches and casting eerie distortions in the craggy silhouettes of the roses that seemed both to bloom and sinisterly leer. "Father," it was Madeline's voice, sharper than the wind that tossed her damp hair about. Her figure emerged from the undergrowth, bathed in the sickly glow of lightning, illuminating the estate behind her, forming jagged shadows. Where did it come from?" he asked, struggling to suppress the tremor that threatened to betray his own anxiety. "From the western trellis," she pointed, her eyes wide as they struggled to pierce through the dark. "Something happened to Lady Aveline. We must hurry." Before they could tread further into the enveloping darkness, an unexpected rustle drew their attention. There, half hidden behind a cluster of laurel bushes, her hands clenched tightly, stood their quarry. Aveline herself, her expression torn between resolve and horror. The sight of her brought unease, like a sudden chill. She seemed wreathed in darkness, a spectre against the gathering storm. "You exhumed a very nature of fright," Father Brown began cautiously, "but your discovery might prove most grave." "It's not just the scream," she stammered, her gaze darting about as though the shadows themselves had ears. I found something in the garden, a letter, torn, stained, a warning." Her voice cracked, words spilling forth as if drawn from some well of dread. "It speaks of a pact, an unholy arrangement connected to Lady Trent." "A letter?" he repeated, intrigued but wary. Letters often brought ruin and revelation in equal measure. "Have you found it here, where the roses grow wild?" she interjected, her fingers trembling. "I thought nothing of it until now. I was gathering blooms for the funeral's adornment when I stumbled over a tangle of roots. It lay hidden beneath." Father Brown felt an unexplained calamity linger around Lady Aveline. The storm's roar seemed to echo her unspoken fears. "And your tale of dread, what essence does this letter hold?" Aveline hesitated before producing a crumpled scrap of paper, its edges tattered and faint. She handed it over with fingers that shook as if she feared the very content would burn them. As lightning briefly forked across the sky, he grasped the fraying edges and unfolded it carefully under the dim light seeping through the clouds. The words were jagged, scribbled in an agonized scrawl. "To act against this promise will unleash darkness. Blood must flow to balance the scales." Father Brown's heart thundered dangerously in his chest. A pact. Madeline's breath hitched. Father, could someone really? A consequence of greed often demands sacrifice, he replied grimly, feeling the weight of the garden's beauty overshadowed by a deeper mystery. Each rose, fragrant and alluring, stood like a hidden dagger, perfectly poised to inflict a mortal wound. Not far off would Aveline's suspicious wanderings derive, he mused, glancing toward the garden's periphery, where shadows twitched like restless fingers. You, Lady Aveline, had reason to dig deeper. She met his gaze, fear swirling in her eyes. But when would I have made a decision to harm? I've loved Margaret more than myself, yet now I cannot ignore the voices chasing after this terror. Therein rests a truth, Father Brown offered, steeling his resolve. But we must seek counsel, for there are others thrumming with such desperation. As they edged toward the trellis, the distant echo of thunder roiled ominously, and the ground quaked underfoot, a prelude to an imminent quake that shuddered through the aura of the estate itself. Father Brown couldn't shake an unsettling premonition. There lay lurking shadows sharper than the wind, plotting amidst the roses. But then, amidst their whispered deliberations, a murmured rustling ceased, and the air grew heavy and dense, as if laden with secrets privy only to the flora around them. Releasing the letter as if it burned his fingers, he turned sharply, detecting the trace of movement just outside his periphery, a glimmer of white, but a glimpse of someone, retreating into the thicket. "Stay behind," he warned as he followed the glimpse into the dimness, heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and dread. The shadows seemed to stretch and pull away, merging into the depths of the garden, wherein lay tangled truths. "Father," Madeline hissed, panic igniting in her voice behind him. But the night swallowed her despair as he pressed forward into the undercurrent of whispers, footfalls muffled on the drenched soil. Suddenly, the silhouette halted, turning sharply to confront him. "You shouldn't have come," the figure spoke, voice sinking into a tension-soaked stillness that suffocated the very air. "Aveline," he stammered, caught between the cloaked identity of his pursuer and the dread that followed his drawn breath. An instant later, with a violent rustle, like raging souls, that which he pursued burst forth from the darkness. "Turn back," the voice implored, the cadence frantic, wild and torn, before the air shattered with the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. It ricocheted terrifyingly off the walls of the garden, sounding a death knell amid the storm's raging fury. Father Brown felt the cold fingers of fear clench at his throat. There, in the flickering shadows, destiny had taken a strict turn. Aveline was not the only secret bearer in the garden. Someone else lurked, with motives as tangled as the roses. The very blood demanded to soothe an undying hunger. "Madeline, stay close," he shouted, glancing back to reassure her, even as the darkness grew heavier around him. As he turned forward, the garden seemed to leap toward a violent resolution. A gasp from the shadows, treachery unleashed, and his heart thudded against his ribs as the pieces began collapsing furiously, tipping into peril. Then another flash of light exploded in the darkness, a lantern swinging wildly, revealing a figure among the roses. "Run!" he screamed, as the garden erupted into chaos, and stillness was nowhere on the horizon. Chapter 6. The Vanishing Suspect. The chilling crack of a gunshot reverberated through the storm-laden air, as if the night itself protested the brutal act. Heart racing, Father Brown spun on his heels, adrenaline igniting every sense. The figure he'd pursued, lost to the darkness after the deafening shot, seemed to dissolve into the gloom like mist before the storm. "Madeline," he called, desperately hoping she was still close, his voice battling the howling winds swirling through the garden, now transformed into a theater of shadows and suspicion. "We must find safety." But even as he uttered the words, a sense of foreboding settled heavy in his chest, like a stone. The night had unraveled threads that shouldn't have been touched. Madeline's voice rang out from the periphery, trembling and urgent. "Father, over here!" By the trellis, glimpsed through dancing candlelight, she stood clasping a handful of wilting flowers, their petals kissed by the rain, evidence of nature's indifference to human folly. He hastened toward her, the ground squelching beneath his boots as they navigated the tangled maze of shrubbery and wild rose bushes, straining his ears against the cacophony of rain and reinforcing screams of the tempest. "What did you see?" he pressed, scanning their surroundings as his mind raced, decrypting each revelation of the stormy night. I didn't see anything, but I felt it," she stammered, her breath ragged with fear. "Someone was lurking near the well. I swear. There was something, a shadow. They vanished in an instant. I thought, surely it was Lady Aveline, but—" "Lady Aveline?" Father Brown's pulse quickened. "We must warn her." "No, Father." Madeline cut him off, an intensity rising in her tone. "That's just it. The noise? I thought it came from the trellis, but what if—" She faltered, apprehension clutching at her heart. "What if she's in danger?" Father Brown raised an eyebrow, philosophy resting into focus against a backdrop of chaos. "Natural instinct often eludes reason. We both know it, yet something about this scent, like a phantom sniffing through the air, promises more complexity. What if Aveline is not the victim, but another player in this grim theater?" His mind swirled like the tempest above. "We must move, and quickly. The longer we remain idle, the thicker the web spins around us." As they pressed onward, the garden teetered between beauty and menace, sculptures of moonlight illuminating the haphazard play of flora around them. Lightning split the sky, casting an ominous glow upon fallen petals that seemed to pulse with life, each one holding stories of deceit, suffocated truths, veils beneath their soft appearances. They neared the old arbor, its once pristine frame now warped by time as it loomed like a dark sentinel. Father Brown wondered whether their pursuit would further entrap them in a conundrum where each became suspect. The key, its presence igniting questions about entrances and exits clandestinely utilized. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the cool metal, a reminder of doors waiting to be unlocked and forgotten secrets yearning for light. "Did you notice anything unusual?" Father Brown inquired, redirecting his thoughts toward the objective at hand. "Anyone behaving strangely prior to the gunshot?" Madeline hesitated. "There were whispers by the west wing, just before the storm intensified," she began, her eyes reflecting the candlelight. "Between Lord Sebastian and Lady Trent, something about trust misplaced. I didn't think it mattered at the time." "Trust? Trust is but a fickle flower that can thrive or wilt with the slightest touch." He nodded perceptively, undoing the knots of deeper human intentions. Each word spoken drapes another layer upon those cloaked in persuasion. We must seek the truth woven within emotions, lest we continue to unearth nothing but deceit. As the rain began tapering to a drizzle, the sound of hurried footsteps disturbed the silence. A thud, a murmur. "In the flower beds," Father Brown urged, and they ducked behind the low hedge. The figures moving through the weathered ivy revealed themselves to be Carruthers and another uniformed constable, soaked to the bone and wrestling with the damp cuffs of their trousers. "There's been no sign of Aveline," Carruthers reported, his voice strained and urgent. "The maid claims she heard her scream, and then nothing. I mean, is there truly no wisdom in this madness unfolding around us?" Father Brown cursed under his breath. "We are running out of time, Inspector. Aveline mustn't slip away like a fresh raindrop into the thirsty earth, or the house of cards we tread upon will collapse into chaos." They broke their concealment, scrambling towards them, when Madeline suddenly stilled, eyes fixed on the wisteria nearby. "Father, look!" A long, shimmering ribbon fluttered in the breeze, lost among the leaves, a garish piece of crimson cloth. Instinctively, Father Brown knelt down, grasping the fabric, feeling its soft texture between his fingers. Its origin betrayed a revelation. It matched the very dress Lady Aveline had been wearing before they embarked into this gripping night. "Aveline," he called, the urgency of his voice echoing through the silent foliage. "Where are you?" The only response was the wind's mournful wail ebbing through the garden, an absence more deafening than her presence. The malevolence circling them thickened by the seconds that passed, and then, punctuating the night, was a new scream, a desperate, splintering cry that sliced through the air like glass, closer this time, from the direction of the well. With no time to lose, they surged toward the sound, pulses racing as dread surged along the back of Father Brown's neck. Arriving at the well, every thought danced dangerously close to home. The figures at the brim, looming almost cavernous, the depths beckoning them to peer inside. But just as they approached, a figure burst into view. Aveline's white form emerged skyward, a sudden apparition against the storm. "Help!" Her voice cracked, stark against the flicker of lightning, illuminating her desperate gaze. In a sudden turn, a shadow darted from another direction, sweeping towards her, aggressive, menacing. "Stand back," Father Brown yelled, dropping the cloth in his urgency, rushing forward only to feel the choking grip of realization. The figure wasn't retreating. They were not looking to apprehend, but to eliminate. Without warning, amidst the chaos of man's folly, the floodgates of fate opened wide, enclosing them all in a web of terror as the figure lunged toward Aveline, and Father Brown's heart thundered as he stumbled into that gnawing darkness, sending everything into a harrowing spin. In that harrowing moment, the question unfurled. What truth lay hidden beneath layers of trust? Would Aveline vanish as the linen slipped through their fingers, or would night yield its heartbeat to unveil the secrets painted in crimson shadows? Chapter 7. A Shadow at Matins. The chapel bells tolled erratically, a frantic knell that mingled with the last echoes of a haunting scream, reverberating through the storm-swept night, freezing Father Brown in his tracks. The candlelit shadows danced upon the crumbling stone walls, flickering as if aware of the dread pooling in the corners of the dim chapel. A fleeting silhouette flitted past the heavy wooden doors, a figure fleeing, vanishing like a wisp of smoke through the gathering tempest. Heart racing, Father Brown dashed towards the exit, a foreboding chill whispering promises of unspeakable truths as he crossed the threshold into the rain-battered night. "Father," came a trembling voice, pulling him back for a moment, grounding him. Madeline stood soaked and shivering, drenched from the recent storm, her wide eyes betraying a fear that clawed at her heart. "Did you hear the scream? It came from the chapel. I thought I saw—" "There's no time," he cut her off, urgency threading through each word. We must see who remains inside. They may be in grave danger. Together, they slipped into the chapel, the air thick with the scent of burnt candles and damp stone. Here, amidst the amber glow and the cold touch of the storm outside, ancient secrets might awaken, while fresh fears curdled in the shadows. As they stepped further inside, the thrum of their footsteps echoed like a disrupted heartbeat. The row of confessionals stood ominously in the corner, waiting, as if inviting the guilty and the innocent alike to lay bare their souls. Father Brown approached the nearest box with trepidation. He paused before it, noticing an odd impression in the wood, a faint, irregular mark, scuffed and partially obscured by rain that had seeped through the open door. As he brushed his fingers over the grain, a faint echo of muffled sobbing reached his ears. He exchanged a glance with Madeline. It felt like the world had contracted to this singular moment, drenched in shadows, veiled in unspeakable anguish. "Someone is in there," Madeline whispered. The grim intensity of her tone sent a rush of impulse through him, and he swung the door of the confessional open. Inside, he found a woman, pale and trembling, hunched over, seemingly lost in despair. "Lady Aveline," he breathed, the name sharing the air with disbelief. How had fate wrenched her here, hidden yet so tortured in plain sight? She raised her head, her features ghost-like, framed by the flickering shadows cast by the candle on the altar behind her. "Misunderstanding," she gasped, her eyes wild. "Father, it's all been—" But before another word could reach him, a loud crash from the chapel entrance brought them back to reality. "Inspector Carruthers," a firm voice shouted, "we need to secure the premises. There are reports of a gunshot." His heavy footsteps sounded closer, drowning out the chorus of fear that spilled from Aveline's lips. "Don't let them take me," she implored, grasping his arm with a trembling hand that felt both desperate and desperate for truth. Father Brown's instincts sharpened. Here lay not merely a frightened widow, but a woman steeped in shadows, deeper than the night surrounding them. "What did you see?" he pressed, anchoring himself in the gravity of her denial. "What truth have you been hiding, Aveline?" A flicker of defiance ignited her eyes. The embers still fought against despair. "There are things, Father," she whispered, casting furtive glances towards the door, as if one breath might unearth the horror looming just outside. "Things you wouldn't understand." "But I must understand," he countered, striving for clarity amidst the chaos enveloping them. "I cannot sift through the wreckage of lies without your truth." Aveline inhaled sharply, trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. "It was never meant for you to discover the deeds of this house. Secrets buried beneath the floorboards, long before the bloodied rose petals kissed the earth." Father Brown's heart sank as he recalled the crimson cloth nestled in the leaves. "Bloodied petals," he murmured, realization flooding through him like cold water. "Is it true that—" Suddenly, a shadow darted past the confessional, a fleeting silhouette vanishing into the depths of the nave, heart pounding against the fabric of confusion enveloping them. "Someone is here," he exclaimed, grasping Aveline tightly by the arm. "We must exit now." Another crash echoed, but this time, from behind the altar, a muffled grating sound, rending the air as if something was being unearthed or unmasked. "Father!" Madeline's voice rang out again, compelling and full of terror. He turned to see her expression twist in shock as she pointed towards the altar. Leaning over, a low groan emanated from beneath the stone slab, a deep, aching sound that was unmistakably human. "No," Aveline gasped, dread colorless upon her features. "It cannot be." "Stay back," Father Brown commanded, his instincts flaring as he rushed toward the altar, adrenaline coursing through him like a surge of electricity. He pulled away the heavy cloth lying draped over it to reveal a trapdoor, half ajar, the darkness yawning wide into a terrifying abyss. Aveline's cries echoed as the shadow behind them loomed larger, its shape flitting like a phantom between the dancing shadows of the chapel, coming ever closer. "Help!" she screamed, eyes wide with horror as the figure lunged forward, and Father Brown's heart lurched at the thought of what might emerge from the hidden depths. And then, amidst the chaos and shrieks of confusion, a flash of pale fingers clasping a small object caught the dim light, a blood-stained letter. It fluttered from the trapdoor's confines, spiraling into the air like a doomed sparrow, and in its descent lay the shocking truth that bore the weight of guilt heavier than stone, leaving Father Brown standing at the precipice of an unspeakable revelation. At that moment, the chapel felt as if it would implode under the darkness pressing in around him, the vibrant tapestry of deceit threading tighter around his heart. Before he could react, a crashing sound reverberated, and then a shot rang out, slicing through the air. The world spun wildly, blurred by tension, confusion, and fear, as Father Brown staggered back, heart pounding in his ears, shrouded in questions and secrets yet to unfurl, the very essence of human folly entwined in the tales of Aveline and the deadly shadows that followed. The truth lay etched in blood, and whether it would resurface to air its grievances remained a grim shadow overshadowing the sanctuary, leaving them all breathless, suspended between revelation and despair. Chapter 8. The Locked Door. A sharp crack echoed through the dimly lit corridor, a resounding gunshot that shattered the fragile veil of the storm-ridden night, leaving Father Brown momentarily paralyzed, every instinct crackling with urgency and dread. Rain lashed against the windows like 1,000 desperate fingers, and the chapel shadows morphed, twisting into grotesque shapes that danced ominously as if heralding a disaster yet to come. The reverberation of the shot was soon followed by the frantic rush of feet, heavy and determined, on the stone floor behind him. "Father!" Madeline's shrill voice pierced through the air, urgency clawing at her tone. He spun around, catching her gaze, wide and frantic, filled with a terror that mirrored his own unease. The fervent wind howled outside, battering the ancient chapel with nature's wrath, as if calling out warnings from the forgotten past. "What do we do? We can't stay here. We must find Aveline." With a sense of foreboding tightening in his chest, Father Brown grasped the key that hung heavy from his pocket, the very key to the locked study of Lady Trent. It felt weighty with implication, as though it held within its metal the secrets of a life encumbered with shadows and unspoken fears. "We go to the study," he announced with a resoluteness that belied the quickening pulse in his throat. "There's something there that may cast light upon these dark happenings." They raced down the treacherous corridor, the air thick with must and the scent of damp stone, as they approached the imposing door, a relic of the house's bygone grandeur. Its wood bore the marks of age, punctuated by a heavy iron latch that had seen flames flicker in many a hearth. The key slid into the lock with an authoritative click, an unsettling sound, echoing like a funeral bell, hinting at the revelations awaiting them. As he opened the door, an oppressive silence enveloped them, as if the room itself had been holding its breath, waiting for the Intruders. The chamber lay shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the flicker of the storm rattling the panes. Dust motes swirled in the light as Father Brown advanced cautiously, the air thickening with a tension that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "It's so quiet," Madeline murmured, her voice trailing off. He stepped gingerly inside, his eyes drawn to a massive oak desk at the far end of the room. Papers lay strewn about, and the whisper of desolation seemed alive among the pages, tantalizing him with hints of secrets left to gather dust. Beneath the inky scrolls and old volumes, he glimpsed a leather-bound journal, its corner worn from countless anxious fingers tracing its pages. With an intuitive pull, he reached for it, feeling a chill settle upon his spine as he opened it. The scrawl was unmistakably Aveline's, chaotic, scrawled in desperation, capturing fragments of her fears and dreams. The lines spilled across the pages, detailing obsessions that entwined the lives of those she held dear, and the lurking terror that seemed to follow them all like a looming specter. "I feel as though someone watches me," one entry read, ink splotched with emotion. "Every shadow seems to breathe menacingly upon me. I fear I am losing my grasp on the world I once knew. What remains when the light dies? What sins shall be paid?" Madeline leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm against his skin. "Father, could this have been what she feared?" Her voice trembled, the words barely surfacing above a whisper. "Do you think she foresaw this?" "Yes," he murmured, his brow furrowing as he turned the pages, absorbing her fears, her dreams woven tightly into the fabric of the house. As he read, a singular phrase caught his eye, a mention of an unforgiven act, scribbled in a frantic hand, followed by the enigmatic initials CTCT. Father Brown pondered aloud, golden thoughts shifting rapidly in his mind. Who could that possibly signify? He closed the journal, pausing to stare at the desolate decor around him, the ornate frames hanging askew, as though to mock the remnants of a once lavish life, now decaying in the twilight. Before he could voice his thoughts, the door swung open abruptly, the furious wind thrumming violently against him. Startled, Father Brown wheeled around, heart racing. There stood Inspector Carruthers, his face pale and stricken, water cascading from his slicker and pooling upon the time-worn floorboards. "Father," he called, his voice taut with urgency, "we are no longer safe. Someone has been discovered dead, outside the chapel." Time stood still, the gravity of his words ensnaring Father Brown in a vice of horror. "Who?" he echoed, dread pooling in the pit of his stomach, the fresh memory of the gunshot still ringing in his ears. "A bladder cola," Carruthers stammered, his voice trembling. "I believe it to be Lord Trent." The name reverberated ominously, crashing through his thoughts like the thunder tumbling across the evening sky. A hidden resentment surged through the corridors of his mind, unwinding connections that threaded through this tangled web previously obscured from his vision. Now, with every heartbeat, the specter of their truth loomed larger. The locked door of the study, an utterance of secrets yet untold, suggested connections forged in layers of betrayal. "We must run," Madeline urged, her grip tightening on his arm, fear radiating from her wide eyes. "Before we become the next victims of this madness." Just as they turned to flee, a noise echoed, faint, ghostly laughter mingling with the cacophony of the storm, and a chill ran through Father Brown, shocking him to stillness. The laughter seemed like a taunting whisper in darkness, an otherworldly recognition of the secrets lying beyond their grasp. Suddenly, the light flickered violently. A dark figure materialized in the doorway, pale and slick with rain, silhouetted against the tempest, an envoy of nightmares. "You shouldn't be here," the figure hissed, voice slithering like a snake. Father Brown's heart plummeted, the words hanging heavy in the charged air. Time fractured around him, every thought collapsing into a singular truth. Secrets were brewing, and he was only just beginning to whittle down the labyrinth of deception. Was the truth about to be unearthed at the cost of their lives? It was then, amidst the swirling chaos and the kaleidoscope of shadows, that another shot rang out, a flare of blinding light, breaking the darkness, but this time all thoughts of mystery converged into sheer terror. The echoes of laughter intertwined with the fading gasp of revelation, leaving Father Brown suspended at the precipice of madness. The door to understanding locked tighter than it had ever been. Chapter 9. The Cross in the Attic. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and dread as Madeline stumbled back, horror etched across her face, her piercing scream still echoing within the darkened corridors of the chapel. "Father Brown, behind you," she gasped, but the sound of her voice was drowned out by the crack of thunder resounding ominously above. Over the tumult, a ghostly figure appeared in the far doorway, half obscured by shadow, a face etched with fear, yet marred by something darker, a premonition of violence yet to unfold. "Get to the attic," Father Brown shouted, feeling his heart hammer like war drums against his chest, as he grasped Madeline's arm, pulling her away from the looming threat. They burst into the stairwell, the relics of the chapel dimly illuminated by flashes of lightning that threw savage silhouettes against the walls. Each step echoed ominously as the wooden boards groaned beneath their weight, the sound mixing with the storm's voice as if the house itself were protesting their intrusion. An antique cross dangled incongruously from the rafters of the attic, swaying gently as Father Brown flung open the door, revealing a derelict space cluttered with forgotten memories and ghosts of the past. Dust particles floated through the slivers of light, swirling like lost souls, fighting to break free from their earthly chains. "What are we looking for?" Madeline whispered, dread saturating her every word as she peered into the gloom. "Truth, my dear," Father Brown murmured, his voice steady and calm amidst the symphony of chaos outside. "And perhaps redemption." He stepped cautiously into the attic, searching the dim corners where the echoes of forgotten conversations lay thick on the air. As the wind howled mournfully from the cracks in the old wood, he caught sight of an ornate chest, its brass fittings tarnished, like memories turned sour. "Help me with this," he urged firmly, guiding Madeline to his side as they heaved it open. Inside lay a tangle of precious artifacts, a tarnished silver candlestick, embroidered linens, and at the very bottom, a delicate, antique cross, woven with intricate designs. It shimmered faintly in the flickering light, evoking a sense of nostalgia, something both sacred and haunting, echoing tales of love and loss. "This belonged to Lady Trent," he whispered, part awe and part unease, "and within it lies the residue of this family's scandalous past." "What do you mean?" Madeline asked, her brows knitting together as she rummaged through the remains of years of neglect. What scandal could be so powerful it prompts murder? Many secrets hide beneath the guise of love, especially in a family tied tightly by obligation. "Observe this," Father Brown said, lifting the cross delicately to the light. Beneath it, he noticed a fragment of parchment, folded tightly, its surface stained with age, yet the script still bold enough to speak volumes. An unfinished letter, he murmured, a flare of curiosity igniting within him. Madeline leaned closer, the glimmer of realization dawning on her face. Could it tie to Aveline, or to Lord Trent's demise? Father Brown turned his attention to the attic's dark recesses, recalling the last exchanges they had uncovered in the study. Every artifact has a story, and every letter a consequence, he mused aloud, poring over the contents. As he delicately unraveled the script, the familiar name emerged, tethered to the sinister web they had stumbled into. C.T. What if... It can't be, Madeline interrupted, catching her breath, eyes wide. You think it's connected to the murder? It must be, Father Brown insisted. The storm outside intensified, belaboring the outlines in the cracked windows as if nature itself was sympathizing with the troubled souls. C.T. could represent a key figure, a person whose presence has haunted this family's lineage through guilt and vengeance. With meticulous scrutiny, he continued to read, piecing together the words as if they were jigsaw fragments. He could feel the build-up of tension, sense the whirl of emotions connected to each stroke of ink, long-standing grievances and dormant fears clawing to the surface. It speaks of an unforgiven act, he finally disclosed, the words landing heavy between them. A past which perhaps ties directly to Lord Trent's legacy. We must find out who C.T. truly represents and their connection to this tragedy. Their discussion was cut short as a sudden crash reverberated through the attic. Startled, they exchanged alarmed glances before the door swung wide open, wind howling insidiously. A figure loomed in the doorway, a dark silhouette, draped in shadow and soaked from the rain, eyes glinting like obsidian. You shouldn't be here. The voice slit through the air, as sharp and foreboding as a shattered dream. It was Inspector Carruthers, his face pale and strained. Father, they are after you. Who? Father Brown's brow furrowed, but the gravity of the moment snatched the words before they could escape. The walls seemed to tremble with a sudden crackle of energy, as if the fabric of reality was threading itself tight with the knowledge of grim intentions. Just then, Madeline gasped, her voice barely rising above the tempest. Is it true? Have you found something? The inspector hesitated, his gaze flitting nervously from Madeline to Father Brown. There's more to Lord Trent's death, evidence left behind, and it implicates someone we least expected. We must... His next words were drowned out by a thunderous roar. In that moment, the cross slipped from Father Brown's fingers, clattering to the floor, the delicate glass splintering like their grasp on the truth. The attic door slammed shut, with a force that shook the timbers, plunging them into chaos, and the lights flickered out, leaving only the panicked breaths of those caught in the web of the past. As Father Brown reached for the shrouded whispers of the discovered parchment, the soft thud of footsteps echoed through the attic's gloom. Someone was drawing near, a presence now fully interlaced with terror and deceit. Desperately, he turned his ear to the darkness, heart racing. In this claustrophobic space, confessions lay hidden, and motives lurked sharper than ever, as if the confession of sins was not far away, but lurking, eyes wide shut, waiting to pounce. Then came a low tremor, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps climbing the old stairs, methodical and determined. "They're coming," Madeline breathed, her voice trembling as the door rattled violently against the barricade of the attic. Father Brown turned to the two accompanying him, heart racing like the stampede of 1,000 wild beasts. "We need to trap the truth here tonight," he declared with conviction. "Whatever lurks in the shadows must emerge. There can be no more secrets." But just as he prepared to confront the gathering storm, the door flung open, not from their side, but from the other, and a figure stepped into the light, drenched and wild-eyed. "You should have aimed for the truth, Father," the figure hissed, a gun glinting in the darkness. Their intentions clearer than ever, yet buried beneath layers of mystery far deeper than what lay on the surface. The attic felt perilous, poised to reveal the secrets that had woven death into its fabric. And as Father Brown gathered his wits, every acutely honed instinct told him they were now nearer to a truly explosive confrontation, one that could unravel the illusion of safety they had held onto so tightly, or bring them to the brink of their undoing. Chapter 10. The Other Side of Forgiveness. A thunderous crash shook the very timbers of the attic, as the figures huddled within exchanged frantic glances, bracing themselves against the encroaching darkness that pressed inward like a living entity. "Stay close," Father Brown commanded, with a sense of urgency that resonated deep in his voice, his heart beating in sync with the relentless pounding of the storm outside. Lightning splintered the sky, illuminating the glistening figure of Inspector Carruthers, his face twisted in stark terror, yet glimmering with a steely resolve. "Father, we have to confront them now," the inspector urged, stepping closer, his eyes darting toward the open door as if expecting a ghostly hand to reach out from the shadows. The wind howled its furious lament, each gust slapping against the walls like an angry spirit demanding freedom. Thus, a palpable terror coalesced in the attic, a harbinger of unspoken darkness waiting to spill forth. Madeline pressed her back against the crumbling chest, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the remnants of the past. "What do we do?" she whispered, the question barely audible over the cacophony. "Are we truly safe here?" "Safe? Forgiveness may not provide safety against those who refuse to forgive," Father Brown murmured, lifting his gaze to the door as another flash lit the cramped space, revealing that unmistakable silver gleam of the gun Carruthers had wrested away from the shadows. Caught a glimpse of its barrel beckoning disaster, an invitation to a grim fate. "Listen," Carruthers demanded, pressing a finger to his lips. "Someone approaches. They know we're here." As if in affirmation, heavy footsteps stomped up the wooden stairs, echoing through the hollowed silence like a funeral march, bringing with them the stench of dread. "It's him," Madeline breathed, eyes wide, her conviction palpable as her worst fears took form. "CT." "No," Carruthers retorted sharply, his unease slicing through the tension as a raw nerve was struck. "We must hold back judgment. The truth will unravel soon enough." Behind him, the shadows shifted and writhed. The air thickened, a gasoline line of anticipation waiting to catch fire. The letter in Father Brown's pocket felt even heavier, secrets waiting to be divulged. "May I remind you," he murmured, his voice low and steady, "that sometimes it is the very facade of innocence that conceals the basest motives." "I was there, Father," Madeline interjected, her fear turning to indignation. Aveline insisted on holding the family's past close, yet she could have prevented everything. How fragile our trust was. She bit her lip, wrestling with her thoughts as inky shadows pooled at her feet. What if she has tied herself to something darker? Many believe darkness harbors an inevitable end, only to find themselves bound tighter within its embrace, Father Brown replied, his gaze piercing her introspection. What secrets lay beneath her surface? A heart compromised in silence. The door rattled ominously, revealing only cold night air, until, before their eyes, a solitary figure appeared, flanked by shadows, dappled in rain, a visage marked by both gentleness and despair. "You need to listen, Father Brown," the newcomer spoke, breathless with urgency, to what Aveline had to say before. Another crash of thunder split the air, sending reverberations coursing through the very cores of their souls. "Evelyn," the inspector's tone wavered, revealing too much, too soon, as if revealing a fatal flaw in their fragile web of protection. CT was never an entity to fear. "It is the innocence of those harbors that must come to light," she continued, her fingers shaking as she clutched a letter stamped with an ominous seal, drenched and dog-eared with age, yet visibly crucial. "Let me see that," Father Brown exclaimed, drawn in like a moth to a candle flame. He reached for the parchment, but the air turned, electric, a tension that sparked hair on the back of his neck. "Father," Madeline warned, holding a breath that hung suspended in the chilling air. "Trust, perhaps." He took a step forward, focused solely on Evelyn's intent, oblivious to the way the shadows twisted in the corners, yet in the back of his mind lingered the dread of deception lurking just outside their tight circle. "Evelyn," he pushed, steeling himself as their eyes locked. "What lies beneath this letter? The essence of its content? Why choose the light? It reveals." Aveline had no choice but to stay. "For her mother," Evelyn stammered, the weight of ancestral guilt tormenting her voice. "It speaks of a pact, sealed with blood, to protect a family's honor." And then she hesitated, drawing back slightly. Father Brown felt the pulse of urgency through him. "And this pact has led us to tragedy," he concluded, his intuition flaring with the sense that ghosts yet lingered, their moans woven with the fabric of history, thundering accusations born from unbridgeable divides. "Attached to her heart was a secret," Evelyn continued, unnerved yet compelled, "one that could bring her entire legacy crashing down." A sudden explosion of sound outside drew their focus, a heavy thud, then a muffled voice, blurred by the fury of wind and rain. "You need to decide quickly," Inspector Carruthers warned, casting a sidelong glance towards the doorway, eyes narrowing as the footsteps grew louder. "If CT has rallied allies and seeks vengeance, the battle is closer than we realize." Madeline gasped, pressing herself closer to the chest, yet it was Father Brown's voice that broke through the chaotic cacophony. "A family's honor or its sins," he mused aloud, the realization dawning upon him like the lightning split across the sky. A desperate search for forgiveness often breeds the roots of destruction. But with that letter lies a testimony, a grip on truth that can unravel this tapestry of secrets. Evelyn's hand faltered, her eyes wide with understanding as she clutched the fragile parchment. "Forgiveness is not absolution," she said, her voice trembling. "But perhaps it can be a key." Before Father Brown could respond, the attic door swung open with a deafening crash, and the figure familiar from nightmares strode across the threshold, drenched and fierce, a predator reveling in the hunt. "I warned you about seeking the truth, Father Brown," they screamed into the tempest. In a heartbeat, Father Brown knew the critical threads of fate had begun to intertwine, yet the looming shadows pressed in, and a sensation of dread washed over him like the heavy rain falling outside. Then there came the unmistakable click of a gun's hammer being drawn back. Step forward then, the figure said, voice a silken whisper sharpened by malice. Show me what forgiveness lies beyond these walls. The room thickened with tension, bitter and acrid as the very air crackled with danger. A precipice now breached with bloody intentions, leaving only one question to hang in the damp atmosphere. What truth demanded an ultimate sacrifice? The flickering light dimmed, plunging them into despair, and Father Brown felt the weight of awakening before the darkness crashed over them all like a coming storm. Chapter 11. The Shocking Confession. A gunshot rang out, splintering the charged air and thundering in tandem with the storm that raged outside. The deafening crack echoed through the attic, ricocheting off the peeling rafters, drowning out the howl of the wind. Father Brown's chest tightened as the acrid scent of gunpowder enveloped him, mingling with the fading warmth of the candle that flickered mere feet away. A low groan resonated through the shadows, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze. Panic writhed among the gathered souls like a live wire, a breath held in the shared horror of what lay before them. "Inspector," Madeline cried, pressing a hand to her mouth as the inspector sagged against the doorframe, one hand clutching his side, the other gripping a letter that had slipped from his grasp. Bile rose in Father Brown's throat, a visceral reminder of the price of truth when cast against blood and betrayal. "No," he yelled, the word a prayer cast against the storm, even as the flickering light revealed a dark stain blooming across Carruthers' shirt, an ominous flower of crimson threading through white fabric, the vibrant hue stark against the neglectful shadow of the attic. "Father Brown," Carruthers gasped, breath shallow as his pallor shifted to unearthly. "The truth. You have to find it." A rattle in his voice, as if the very spirit of the man clawed through the body's pain, tearing him down. The storm outside rumbled with a disquieting intensity, the air thick with portent, as if anticipating the revelations poised to unfurl within the crumbling walls. "Get back," Father Brown urged Madeline, stepping forward instinctively, reaching for Carruthers while his mind raced, piecing together the threads of the evening, a tapestry woven of dread and foreboding. He pressed the inspector against the doorframe, struggling to keep him upright, his heart pounding with a rhythm that matched the drumming rains. "We'll get you help. Just hold on." "No, listen," Carruthers stammered through clenched teeth, pain weaving into each syllable. "There's something you must know about Aveline, the pact. It all interlocks." A flash of lightning illuminated Carruthers' face, revealing the trembling shadow of desperation that haunted his features, and Father Brown's thoughts raced. Aveline's name ignited a fire within him, the lingering air thick with secrets once thought buried. "What pact?" "Carruthers, speak plainly," he commanded, his hands trembling against the inspector's warmth, fighting against the rain-soaked tendrils of despair that wrapped around them both. Without warning, the other figure, the one who had stood before him, with threats echoing in thunderous clarity, shifted closer, breaking through the lingering haze of shock and revealing the wild-eyed look to be wrapped tightly around an exquisite calm. "Forgive me for interrupting your frantic scene, Father Brown, but it seems our dear inspector is on the cusp of revelation, though not quite the one you're expecting." "Stay back," Madeline interjected, horrified, but the figure only smiled, a sickly, knowing grin that danced with darkness. "There is no escaping the truth now. We stand on the edge of destiny, you see." "Destiny?" Father Brown echoed, his voice low and firm, even as the shadows seemed to pulse around them. "What do you mean?" What destiny do you impose upon us? The destiny of every choice made in the depths of familial loyalty, the figure replied, cryptically. The knots of obligation, all twisted within generations past. Yours is merely the current strand of a deeper weave, Father Brown. As Carruthers gasped, wrestling against pain, Father Brown's mind sifted through his fading memories, flickers of conversation intertwining with the patchwork of the evening's events. Aveline's tortured past danced on the periphery, entwined with the pressing motives of those surrounding him. The letter's cryptic significance gnawed at his thoughts. "What is it, Carruthers?" he implored, his voice urgent amidst the darkness encroaching. "What wisdom can save us?" It's about Aveline," he gasped, clutching the side of his shirt and grimacing. "She was tormented, a sacrifice made to protect our souls." His eyes flicked toward the letter that lay forgotten on the floor. The blood. "Enough with the riddles," Madeline shouted, her eyes wild with fear, but Father Brown silenced her with a flick of his hand. The puzzle pieces began to align, and the room swelled with heavy implications as he leaned closer to inspect the letter. The storm continued its furious assault, cloaking the attic in an aura of foreboding, but the moments between the thunderclaps whispered secrets through the air like timid phantoms. The surface of the letter revealed aged words that resonated with an eerie familiarity, the strokes of ink imbued with an essence of long-buried necessity. The crimson splatter enriching its edges evoked the specter of violence, and not merely the one that had erupted earlier. A shiver ran down Father Brown's spine as he deciphered the tall letters, written in haste, but nothing he hadn't seen before. Confessions interwoven with blood, declarations that cloaked guilt with righteousness. "This isn't merely a letter of an agreement, is it?" he breathed, realizing the weight of each sentiment scribed across the parchment. "This embodies shackles forged into the very fabric of familial deception. Aveline's blood and her mother. What did she pay for this? Whose hands hold her fate?" Before anyone could give voice to the rising dread that twisted in their throats, a figure stumbled into the door with a wild stagger, a face devoid of reason, filled with dread, and a heart racing with urgency. "Stop! You're all in danger!" the new arrival cried, and as the candle sputtered, this ominous warning flickered, dark shades enveloping Father and his companions, even as truth threatened to burst beyond the dials of their fragile understanding. In an instant, chaos erupted. Madeline's stricken face, Carruthers' gasp, the darkness swallowing the tiny room as another shot rang out, echoing like a funeral bell. A hand, pale and trembling, outstretched into the stifled air that now crackled with electric suspense. I did it," the new figure confessed in a voice that trembled with the weight of history and lives intertwined, sending shockwaves through the attic. "I am the one who bound her to darkness. By the consequence of love." Father Brown's heart plummeted, his senses ablaze as the turbulent storm raged on outside, deafening him to everything but the horrifying truth that loomed at the edge of revelation, a reckoning that demanded confrontation. Suddenly, darkness seemed closer, borders of guilt and innocence slipping away as that confession hung like a noose in the air, waiting to pull them all into an abyss. Chapter 12. The Mercy of the Murderer. The candles sputtered and hissed as the heart of the storm beat against the attic walls, unleashing a torrent of raindrops that shattered the heavy silence with a force reminiscent of gunfire. In that electrifying moment, Father Brown felt the fabric of reality ripple around him. distorting the truths and lies that mingled like smoke. I am the one who bound her to darkness, by the consequence of love. The voice trembled, thrumming with guilt and frantic urgency, a note that struck deep within the soul of every witness present. Father Brown's insides twisted as he locked eyes with the figure who staggered from the shadows, their face twisted by fear, but brightened with the fire of confession. The storm howled outside, and for a moment, time seemed suspended, each heartbeat an echo echoing in rhythm with the raucous wind. Who do you mean?" he managed to force out, grounding himself against the grip of desperation that clawed at the edges of his resolve. I did it." The trembling confessor's hands shook violently, but it was their eyes, wide and wild, that betrayed the mere flicker of sanity as the secrets within threatened to spill over. Aveline, to save her from herself, from the darkness that threatened us all. "Silence," Madeline cried, her face a pale mask of horror as she pressed closer to Carruthers, who leaned against the door, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "You're saying this as if you had no choice. Was she truly a victim, or was it all your doing?" Father Brown remained immovable, every instinct honed to filter through the chaos swirling about them. In that moment, a shuddering thought crystallized in his mind, a hint of clarity obscured by the storm outside. "Yet you speak of love and sacrifice. How does one justify such destruction in its name?" he pressed, his voice quiet but firm, as if anchoring reality amidst the tempest. "I sought to save my family's legacy." The figure crowed, desperation lacing their words with feverish energy as if imparting some forbidden knowledge. "Bound by blood, you cannot understand. The pact was necessary. There are forces at work that you cannot grasp." The candle flickered again, casting an unsteady glow that danced across the room, illuminating the etched expressions of anguish on the faces around him. Carruthers coughed, faintly, the truth on his lips barely making it through a grimace of pain. "You think you do this to protect an innocent. How naive! You have yet to face what true morality demands of you." Father Brown felt the anger rising amidst the turmoil, rippling beneath the surface of calm he sought to maintain. "And yet here we are, straddling the shadows of our own choices while the innocent still lies bleeding in another room," he interjected, suddenly struck by an unsettling realization. Aveline, the very essence of her sacrifice, bound to this catastrophic spiral, they were all puppets, grotesquely entangled in this tragic puppet show. "Do you not see?" The confessed murderer's voice became more frantic, echoing against the wooden rafters. "I was trying to spare her, shield her from the family curse." The expression twisted into one of agonized conviction, shadows dancing like phantoms behind them. "The blood is the life," Father Brown mouthed absently, recalling once again the words of the letter, now partly crumpled beneath the weight of despair. "It seems you hope to escape responsibilities laid bare by the past, but what is it, I wonder, that you fear from the hunt of the truth? What do your actions truly protect?" A wild scream echoed outside, unwitting souls caught in the throes of the unforgiving tempest, seemingly at odds with the burgeoning chaos within. The sound rattled their fragile truths and threatened to collapse their revelations back into darkness. Madeline, wide-eyed and horrified, turned towards the trembling figure. This can't be," she shrieked, her hand flailing instinctively to Carruthers' wound, the blood soaking into her palm and spilling onto the wooden floor. "You can't just destroy lives and call it love." A moment of raw silence fell, pregnant with unanswered questions and the weight of clashing egos. And then, amidst the palpable intensity, the concealed clues solidified in Father Brown's mind like a beacon of piercing clarity, tension unraveling. A flash of insight igniting as he recalled a seemingly innocuous detail buried in the layers of accusation, a subtle tremor in the confession, an emotional undercurrent painting a deeper shade of the culprit's intent. "Tell me," he said quietly, leaning directly into the abyss of frantic eyes facing him. "What pact were you willing to uphold? Was it fear that drove you, or was it something darker?" Yet as the tension mounted dangerously, the atmosphere prickled, foreboding shadows seeming to close in on themselves and wrapping the room in gloom like a serpentine embrace. Father Brown took an instinctive step forward, determined to pierce through the facade of impending doom. "Were those tears you shed mere tokens to a false god, or had you made a sacrifice of your soul?" "No, no," the figure rasped, their voice reducing to a single, panicked breath. "You can't. Nothing shall remain." Before Father Brown could pierce through their crumbling facade, the attic door suddenly exploded inward with an onslaught of wind and rain, the shadows breaking apart as harsh light poured in, a silhouette barely discernible without. In a flurry of confusion, the candle was swept from its resting place, plunging the attic into pitch blackness. A scream echoed through the storm, agony mingling with the rolling thunder, followed by a resounding gunshot that sliced the night air like a wail of sirens. In that fractured moment, Father Brown's heart raced. It was not chaos that seized him. It was the understanding that lives intertwined would be irrevocably altered. As the echoes fanned out into silence, the figure before him slumped to the ground, the darkness pooling ominously around, cradling secrets veiled in shadows as the candlelight flickered back to life. In that haunting light, Father Brown could see the stark reality of tragedy in those eyes once possessed by violent intent, the mercy of a murderer now caught in the web of their own lies, shadows shifting as a deeper truth threatened to flee their grasp. With time fleeting and danger ever present, it dawned upon him, whispering in the dampened air, an oath made in shadows demanding reckoning, a fatal promise that sought comfort even amidst the chaos. As he steadied himself, breath hitching, heart pounding, Father Brown swallowed hard, acutely aware of the dark path ahead, a revelation poised at the edge of his understanding. And in that breathless moment, with secrets swirling through the ether like embers on the wind, he knew one thing was certain. The storm was not over, and the mercy of their actions hung precariously within the balance.